isolated and forgotten by your social circle, this message is for you. It is a natural human reflex to look around at an empty room and assume the worst. We often equate physical aloneness with being abandoned or even penalized for our failures. But consider a different perspective. This loneliness might not be a tragedy, but a highly deliberate, engineered intervention. Think of it as an active removal. Those people did not drift away by accident. They were systematically stripped from your life to clear the way for what comes next. This vacuum of loneliness functions as a protective boundary. Instead of asking why they left, we should look at what you are being kept away from. To understand the removal, we have to look objectively at your former social circle. Rather than a support system, that environment functioned as a restrictive ecosystem that pulled your focus away from your true work. These relationships often act as limiting influences. They functioned as active roadblocks, preventing you from outgrowing the version of yourself they were comfortable with. The underlying dynamic was conditional. They offered love only as long as you remained in weakness, silence, and dependency. Staying in that cycle stopped any real forward momentum. As long as you were tethered to their expectations, your personal evolution stalled. Viewed this way, the removal of these people is a necessary amputation. It is the only way to preserve your future potential. Now that the circle has been cleared, we can focus on the active nature of the empty space. Silence is not an absence, it is a functional environment. Real transformation requires a level of focus that is impossible to achieve in a noisy or crowded social environment. There is a chronological rule to this process. A period of absolute isolation serves as a mandatory prerequisite before any upward movement can occur. This is the time for deep work. The most fundamental internal restructuring happens only when there is no audience present to witness or influence the change. The weight of a lonely season creates the unseen pressure required to forge lasting psychological and spiritual strength. If you are confused right now, that is a predictable part of the process. The mechanics of this internal growth feel indistinguishable from suffering. We must redefine this emotional pain. What you are experiencing is not a penalty for your past, but the friction of your current preparation. This realization transforms the silent environment into a workshop. The isolation is the very thing making the next stage of your life possible. Eventually, you will look back on this season from a different vantage point, viewing this pain in retrospect. From that perspective, the sudden loss of relationships and the long periods of silence will finally reveal their underlying logic. This is a capacity mismatch. The scope of your upcoming purpose exceeds the mental and spiritual limits of the people who were removed. The isolation was necessary because your growth requires an environment that isn't restricted by the expectations of those who only knew you when you were small. You can now face the remainder of this season with a new kind of clarity. You are not being forgotten. You are being built